I used to believe I had finally stepped into the life I always dreamed of, stable, warm, and complete. After years of struggle, heartbreak, and uncertainty, marrying him felt like the beginning of something safe. And when my daughter was born, I thought nothing in the world could shake that happiness. She was my light, my reason to wake up smiling even on the hardest days. My husband used to look at her with soft eyes, holding her tiny fingers like she was the most precious thing in the world. For a while, everything felt right, but I didn't notice how one pair of eyes in the house never softened. My mother-in-law, at first, she wasn't openly cruel. She was the type of woman who smiled in front of guests but measured every word like a hidden blade. She would compliment my cooking but never eat much. She would hold my daughter but never fully embrace her. I told myself it was just her personality, strict, traditional, difficult to read. Still, there were moments that stayed with me, comments that sounded harmless but felt wrong. She has such different features, she once said, studying my daughter's face a little too long. Another time, she asked quietly, "Are you sure she takes after our side of the family?" My husband would always intervene with a tired smile. "Mom, she's just a baby. Don't overthink it." And then he would turn to me and whisper, "She doesn't mean anything bad." So I learned to swallow my discomfort. I learned to smile even when something inside me tightened. But things didn't stop there. The comments slowly became patterns. The patterns became suspicion. And suspicion turned into something heavier, something I could feel growing in the air whenever she entered a room. My daughter, innocent and unaware, would giggle in her arms during family gatherings. But my mother-in-law's gaze would always shift, like she was searching for proof of something she had already decided. One evening I overheard her speaking to a relative in the kitchen. "It's strange," she murmured. "Children usually resemble their father strongly, but this one, the sentence didn't need an ending." I already felt it cut through me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched my daughter breathe peacefully beside me, her tiny chest rising and falling, and I felt something unfamiliar settle in my heart. Fear, mixed with anger I didn't want to admit. The next morning I tried to talk to my husband. "Do you notice how your mother looks at her?" I asked gently. He sighed, already tired before the conversation began. "You're imagining things. She's just old-fashioned." "Old-fashioned doesn't mean she doubts a child's identity," I replied quietly. He sat beside me, taking my hand. "She loves her in her own way. Don't create tension where there isn't any." But I wasn't creating tension. Tension was already living in the house. I was just the only one acknowledging it. Days turned into weeks, and I began noticing small things: missing my daughter's hairbrush, a used spoon, a napkin she had eaten with. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but later, I would remember how carefully my mother-in-law handled those items when she thought no one was watching. Her eyes had changed, not softer, not kinder, certain, as if she was waiting for something to confirm her beliefs. Then came the shift I couldn't ignore. She stopped pretending. At family dinners, she would stare directly at my daughter and say things like, "It's important to know your roots." Or worse, truth always comes out eventually. My husband began noticing the tension too, but instead of confronting it, he avoided it. He buried himself in work longer, he came home quieter, and every time I tried to speak, he would say the same thing: "Just give it time." But I could feel time turning against me. One evening, after everyone had gone to sleep, I saw her in the hallway. She didn't see me at first. She stood by my daughter's stroller, holding something small in her hand, a strand of hair my breath caught. She whispered to herself, "We'll know soon enough." And then she tucked it into her pocket. That was the moment something inside me shifted completely. Not panic, not confusion, but certainty. Something was being planned behind my back. something I couldn't yet see but would soon destroy the fragile piece of my life. And I didn't know it yet, but my daughter was already at the center of a storm I had never agreed to enter. After that night in the hallway, I couldn't breathe in my own home the same way again. Nothing had changed on the surface. Breakfast was still served. My daughter still laughed. My husband still left for work with a tired kiss on my forehead. But everything inside me had shifted. Because I had seen her, my mother-in-law, standing in silence with my daughter's hair in her hand like it was evidence in a case only she understood. From that moment on, I started watching her too, and what I noticed scared me more than anything she had ever said. She had stopped hiding her intention. She became strangely calm, almost satisfied, like someone waiting for a result they were already certain about. She would hum softly while cleaning, glance at her phone often, and sometimes even smile to herself in a way that made my skin crawl. Then the small disappearances began to make sense. The toothbrush I replaced for my daughter vanished. A spoon she used for yogurt disappeared after breakfast. Even a tiny sock went missing from the laundry. At first, I thought I was overthinking, but the pattern was too precise, too deliberate, and the worst part, she was never careless enough to be caught, except that one time. I walked into the kitchen early one morning and saw her wiping down the counter with unusual focus. On the table beside her lay a small sealed plastic bag. Inside it, my daughter's hairbrush. My heart dropped. "Why do you have that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't even flinch. She simply looked at me, then continued wiping as if I hadn't spoken. "It was dirty," she said calmly. "I cleaned it." But I knew she was lying. That wasn't cleaning. That was collecting. That evening, I tried again with my husband. I told him everything: her behavior, the missing items, the way she looked at our daughter like she was solving a puzzle. He listened silently, his face unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back and rubbed his forehead. "You're stressing yourself out," he said quietly. "She wouldn't do something like that." "Then explain the hairbrush," I insisted. He sighed. "Maybe she was just tidying up." I stared at him. "Do you really believe that?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence hurt more than denial. Finally, he said, "I'll talk to her." But I knew he wouldn't confront her the way she needed to be confronted. He always softened things, always gave her the benefit of the doubt. And that was exactly what she relied on. The next few days felt like living inside a tightening circle. My mother-in-law became even more confident, almost proud. She started dropping comments at dinner again, but this time they were sharper. "Some children carry secrets they don't even know about," she said one evening, stirring her tea. Another time, she looked at my daughter and said, "Truth doesn't stay hidden forever." My daughter, too young to understand, just smiled back. But I didn't smile. I was watching a woman who had already decided something about my child, and was preparing to prove it. Then came the moment I knew something irreversible was happening. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps outside our bedroom. My husband was asleep beside me. I carefully got up and opened the door slightly. Down the hallway, I saw her again. My mother-in-law. This time, she wasn't alone with objects. She was holding a small envelope. She paused outside my daughter's room, and I watched her place the envelope into her handbag with careful precision, like it contained something sacred. My heart began pounding so loudly, I thought she would hear it. I stepped back into the room before she could turn. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I noticed her behavior had changed again. She was calmer than ever, too calm, like someone who had already set something in motion, and was simply waiting for it to arrive. At breakfast, she looked at my husband and said casually, "Sometimes, it's better to know the truth than live in confusion." He frowned slightly. What truth? She smiled faintly. You'll see. My stomach twisted. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was planning. She had done something secret, something involving my daughter. Later that afternoon, I overheard her speaking on the phone in low tones near the balcony. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough to freeze me in place. Yes, the sample is ready, just wait for results. My hand gripped the wall. Sample, results. My mind raced through every missing item, every stolen object, every strange look. And then the truth hit me like ice, a DNA test. She had done a DNA test behind my back, not just questioning my daughter. Trying to prove something, trying to destroy something. When she turned around and saw me standing there, she didn't look surprised. She looked prepared, like she had been waiting for me to find out, just not yet. And as I stood there frozen, she said the words that confirmed everything. Don't worry. Soon everyone will know what kind of truth you've been hiding. The day the DNA results arrived, the house felt different, like even the walls were holding their breath. My mother-in-law didn't say a word at breakfast. She didn't need to. There was a strange calm on her face, the kind that doesn't belong to peace but to certainty. She kept glancing at her phone, waiting. Every few minutes, her fingers tapped the table lightly, like she was counting down something invisible. My husband noticed it too. Are you okay, Mom? He asked. She smiled faintly. I'm better than okay, she said. Today, everything becomes clear. My stomach tightened instantly. I looked at my daughter sitting in her high chair, happily playing with her spoon, unaware that she was standing at the center of something she could never understand. I reached for her hand under the table, holding it a little tighter than usual. Mom, I said carefully, what are you talking about? She didn't look at me. You'll know soon enough, and that was it. No explanation, no hesitation, just confidence. By afternoon, she announced it. We should have a family gathering, she said calmly, tonight. My husband frowned. Why? She placed her phone down slowly. Because I don't like confusion in my house. Something in her tone made my skin go cold. That evening, relatives started arriving. I hadn't been told who she invited, but soon the living room was filled with familiar faces, curious, unaware, already sensing drama without knowing its shape. My daughter stayed close to me the entire time, and my mother-in-law, she looked like she was hosting a victory. The atmosphere grew heavier as dinner finished. Plates were cleared too quickly. Conversations faded into whispers. Even the children were quiet. Then she stood up. She didn't ask for attention. She took it. I have something important to say, she announced. The room went silent immediately. My husband looked confused. What is this about? She didn't answer him. Instead, she reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. My breath stopped. I already knew what it was. She held it up like evidence in a courtroom. I had a DNA test done, she said clearly. A wave of confusion swept through the room. My husband straightened. A DNA test for what? Her eyes slowly shifted toward my daughter, for this child. The silence that followed was suffocating. My daughter clung to my arm, sensing tension but not understanding it. I felt my body go cold. You did what? And my husband asked, his voice sharper now. I did what needed to be done, she replied, because something never felt right. I stood up immediately. How dare you touch my daughter without permission? Her gaze snapped to me, without permission, or without guilt. Gasps filled the room. She opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, savoring every second. I think everyone deserves the truth, she said. Then she rated, according to the results, this child does not match the paternal lineage. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then chaos began to ripple through the room. Whispers, shocked looks, someone covering their mouth. My legs nearly gave out. That's impossible. I said quickly, "That's a lie." She tilted her head. "Is it?" My husband didn't speak. He just stared at the paper, his face slowly changing. Not anger, confusion, pain. "Where did you get this test done?" I asked, my voice shaking but firm. "Who handled it?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she smiled. I made sure it was accurate. Something about the way she said it made my chest tighten. But then something unexpected happened. My husband stepped forward, and he said something that changed the entire room. "Mom," he said slowly, "did you ever check your own sample properly?" The room froze again. Her smile faltered for the first time. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. He held the envelope in his hand now, scanning it closely. His expression shifted, first confusion, then realization. "This report doesn't show what you think it shows." She went still. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "What do you mean?" she demanded. My husband looked up at her slowly. "It means you didn't verify the chain properly," he said. "And if that's true, then this test could be invalid." A murmur spread through the room. Her confidence cracked slightly. "That's not possible." But I saw it, a flicker, doubt, and in that moment I realized something had gone wrong. Not with me, but with her plan. My husband turned toward me, then toward our daughter, and for the first time that night, he said something that made the entire room hold its breath. "Before anyone says another word, I want this tested again. Properly, through the hospital, with supervision." Then he looked at his mother. And this time, no secrets. The room didn't move for several seconds after my husband spoke. It was as if his words had frozen time itself. "No secrets," he repeated firmly, still holding the envelope, his eyes now fixed on his mother. My mother-in-law's expression shifted again. This time not confidence, not certainty, but something far more fragile. "Fear. This is ridiculous," she snapped, but her voice lacked strength. "I already told you the truth." My husband stepped closer. "No, you told us your version of the truth." A heavy silence fell. My daughter clung tightly to my leg, sensing the emotional storm even if she couldn't understand it. I gently placed my hand on her head, trying to steady myself as my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Then my husband did something no one expected. He pulled out his phone. "I want a second test," he said calmly. "And I want it done under hospital supervision with full documentation and verified handling." A murmur spread through the guests again, but this time it wasn't on my mother-in-law's side. People were beginning to sense the shift. She laughed nervously. "You think I would fake something like this?" My husband didn't raise his voice. "I think you rushed something you didn't fully understand." Her face tightened. That was the moment everything began to unravel. The second test was arranged quickly. My mother-in-law tried to resist at first, but the damage was already done. Too many eyes were watching now. Too many whispers had formed, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't controlling the narrative. Days passed like a slow storm. She became quieter, restless. Her confidence disappeared completely, replaced by sharp irritation and constant pacing. She stopped making comments about my daughter. She stopped smiling altogether, but the damage she had already caused remained. I still remembered the humiliation, the way she had announced it, the way she had tried to strip my child's identity in front of everyone. And my husband, he was different too, not distant, wiser. He stopped excusing her behavior, stopped saying she doesn't mean it. Instead, he began asking questions he never asked before. Finally, the second test results arrived. We gathered again, but this time no celebration, no guests. No crowd, just truth waiting to be revealed. My mother-in-law sat stiffly on the sofa, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. My husband opened the report slowly, his expression unreadable. I held my daughter close. He read it once. Then again, then he looked up and said the words that shattered everything she had built. The first test was wrong. A gasp escaped her lips. What? He continued, voice steady. The sample chain was compromised. There was contamination and improper handling. This result is invalid. The room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. My mother-in-law stood up instantly. That's impossible. I supervised everything myself. My husband shook his head. No, you didn't supervise the lab. You supervised your assumption. Then he turned the page, and that's when the truth hit fully. The verified test shows, he said slowly, that the child is biologically mine. Silence, absolute silence. My legs nearly gave out. But this time, not from fear, from relief, from vindication, from everything finally collapsing in the right direction. My mother-in-law stumbled back like she had been physically struck. That can't be, she whispered. But it was. My husband closed the file, and there's more, he added. Her eyes snapped up. He looked at her directly. You didn't just make a mistake. You bypassed proper procedure, took samples without consent, and spread false accusations in front of family. The room shifted again, this time against her. Whispers turned into judgment. Her authority evaporated in real time. For the first time, she looked small. Truly small. I was just trying to protect this family, she said weakly, but no one believed it anymore. Even I felt something inside me settle, not anger anymore, but closure beginning to form. My husband stepped closer to her. You didn't protect anything, he said quietly. You tried to destroy my marriage and my child's identity. That sentence broke her completely. Her eyes filled, her voice cracking as she looked around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to support her. But there was no support left, only truth. She turned to me finally, her voice trembling. I didn't mean, I interrupted her, calm but firm. You chose suspicion over trust. You chose humiliation over truth. She flinched. My husband placed a hand on my shoulder. And then, for the first time, he spoke the words that ended everything. If you ever disrespect my wife or my daughter again, you will not be part of our lives. Her face collapsed. And just like that, the woman who tried to destroy us was now the one standing broken in the middle of her own lies. She sank into the chair, and for the first time in the entire story, she whispered, "Please forgive me."